Okay. Hare Krishna and good evening, dear devotees. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Many Moons podcast. We're very excited to be back after a short break. This is our 12th episode, and tonight we're very fortunate to have Jahnava Devi with us. And we are debunking common relationship myths that we see manifesting in the devotee community. Now, we've asked Jahnava to join us tonight for the session because Jahnava is really an expert when it comes to relationships. For those of you that haven't met her before, Jahnava Devi began her yoga journey in the 1980s as a teenager in the West Village of New York City, where she met the then little-known yoga teacher Dharma Mitra. This teacher is now very famous in the yoga world. It was there when she first learned about bhakti and mantra meditation. This served as an important stepping stone that led her to her family entering the bhakti yoga tradition and to accept it as a way of life. After studying literature and psychology at university, Jahnava lived in a bhakti ashram for 5 years, serving in many capacities. After completing her training in the ashram, she went on to earn multiple certifications as a yoga instructor, a life coach, and a relationship specialist. For 8 years, Jahnava lived in India, teaching, counseling, leading workshops for teens and also for adults. Currently, she works with individuals and couples in private practice, leads marriage workshops and internationally. She's also the producer of the award-winning film Women of Bhakti, and it's available on Gaia.com. If you haven't seen that film, I also highly recommend that you see it. It's a very beautiful film, and it definitely deserved all the praise that it's received. So thank you so much, Jahnava, being with us tonight. I know that you're busy. Everyone that I've talked to that has received counseling from you has also expressed that you've really helped them personally, but you've also helped them in their relationships. So we're very grateful for you being with us tonight.
Having me.
So we're going to start off with our first myth that we often hear in ISKCON. I think if you're a lady, you probably have heard this myth. And this is, for a lady to flourish in bhakti, it is essential that she gets married. So, Jahnava, Mata, how would you respond to that idea?
So first of all, let me just say that you called me an expert, but that's a very generous term. So I just have some knowledge, and I'm just going to share it with you today. But my knowledge is not absolute, and I don't claim to be anything more than someone who's just learning and also studying, and I have some knowledge from my training. I'm trained, but I don't know everything. And, there's always exceptions to rules. So these are just my understandings based on my training and my life experience. Okay, so just repeat the question, please.
So a very common held idea is that for a lady to flourish in bhakti, she needs to be married. So marriage is essential.
Well, bhakti is not dependent on anything. So I think we have to first philosophically establish that bhakti is independent. And that's just, a shastric fact that we're not dependent on anything to have our bhakti flourish, except, Guru and Krishna. But an external material circumstance is not going to make or break our bhakti because bhakti is independent. However, external circumstances definitely can support our bhakti, can make it easier or more difficult. And I think that it's very clearly established in our Shastra. And I think just sort of a universal fact that a lot of women, maybe we could even say most women, do desire to have a partner or a spouse. And it's just sort of a natural desire and inclination to have a husband. But that doesn't always happen, right? Sometimes it's just Krishna doesn't send the right person, or there's lots of circumstances. And so that doesn't mean that you cannot flourish in bhakti. And I think whoever is listening / watching right now, every single one of you can think of at least one person you know, a very Krishna conscious, advanced, effulgent woman who's not married, right? So that's proof. I can think of plenty of them. So it's not like a black and white thing. If you're not married, you can't be Krishna conscious. There's women who are married and they're not Krishna conscious, right? Lots of devotees who are not Krishna conscious, but they're married, and then vice versa. So I think that's kind of like a very extreme black and white statement. If you look at it a little bit more nuanced and subtle, then you'll see the idea that for many women, it would be nice. But until then, and if that happens, you shouldn't let anything get in the way of your bhakti, and don't use it as an excuse. And if you're feeling a need for support or companionship or spiritual guidance, then you get that from other people, not from the husband that you don't have.
Thank you so much, Mata. I think what stood out to me is that although it's natural and I think normal for most women to desire to get married and beneficial even for most men to get married, I think we should still discriminate that although it might be beneficial for us, we shouldn't misunderstand that some external circumstance is radically going to change our bhakti, because our bhakti more depends on our desire and, as you said, our guru and our sincerity. So I think it's like we should just have a more, as you said, like a balanced view on this idea, because I think there is a tendency to sometimes think, if I get to marry this person, or if I get to stay at that temple, or go to that community, then I will suddenly become more inspired in my bhakti. And I think that is definitely a misunderstanding and can also lead to disappointment.
Yeah, that's very well said. Agreed. We're waiting for some external circumstance to relieve us of some kind of angst. But yeah, even if we get that need fulfilled, it may not relieve the angst. So we have to go inside to relieve the angst, with the practice, and then also finding people in our lives who nourish us spiritually, make us feel enlivened and nourished, and people that we can connect with emotionally and socially. And yeah, I mean, there's one of the 6 human needs of this hierarchical human needs pyramid is love and connection. So it's explained that not everybody gets love, if we're thinking of like romantic love, but everybody needs connection to survive. So you don't need romantic love to survive, but you need connection. So if there's something missing, you want an actual spouse to have some kind of more intimate relationship with, and you don't have that, just increase your connection with people who you do have nice relationships with people who can uplift you and support you, and you can feel very comfortable and natural with. So it's really about human connection that makes a person thrive spiritually. The love part, maybe not. But it's interesting though, because in traditional cultures, when people talked about love and soulmates, they generally were talking about God, right? They knew that there was like this hole in the heart, and only God could fill that hole. But as cultures and civilizations moved along, I won't say developed, but as time went on, now people have this idea that my soulmate is another human being. And I'm looking for my soulmate. And yeah, God's there in the background, but but nobody can fill that hole except God. God is everyone's soulmate. And another human being can help us or support us or be on that journey with us and get purified with us as we fill that hole with more Krishna consciousness. But you're really setting yourself up for disappointment if you think there's one other human being out there who's going to marry you and then all of your problems are going to be solved, or all your desires will be fulfilled, or you're going to feel just so whole and complete. Only God can do that.
Thank you. That was a very profound and insightful answer. I really liked it. Was very practical that you said that we all need connection, and connection can be found in so many relationships. And then ultimately, we need that connection with Krishna. I think very practical and very useful advice. I'll definitely hold on to that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, thank you. And another thing I really liked, you said, don't rely on just a one person, building that connection so you kind of feel that nourishment throughout your wider community. And linked to that is another myth we keep hearing, over and over again, that your partner should have the same qualities and nature to be compatible. So some people say, if I don't know, if my vana is whatever it is that they perceive themselves to be, my partner should be that. If I'm a very traditional or a very conservative background, my partner should be exactly the same. If I shouldn't steer away, they should be literally like for like to be compatible. So what do you think about that somebody's partner should be exactly like that? If I go to Mangalati 5 days a day, 7 days a week, your partner's got to go 7 days a week. If not, it's not gonna work.
Yeah.
So how
Yeah.
would you
I get the
respond?
point. So there is some truth to that. Look, no two people are exactly the same, right? We both like vanilla ice cream, but I like chocolate cake and you like strawberry cake. We both like getting up early, but I like chanting my japa at home and you like chanting your japa at the temple. We both like going to programs, but I like to come home early and you like to come home late. So, there's no perfect match out there in the sense that everybody is going to think and feel and want to do exactly the same things all the time. However, there is truth to that. If you are a really conservative person and you marry a very liberal person, there is going to be some clashing there. And okay, so that's like sort of external things. But then, Prabhupada does say in his books a lot that the husband and the wife should have similar natures, right? So if they're both in sattva gun, that's really, really helpful. Or whatever guna they're in, it's helpful if they're both in the same guna, because if they're in different gunas, there's going to be a lot of clashing. So there is a kind of commonalities they should share based on their natures, right? That's going to be really helpful for their spiritual lives, because they both want to get up early, or they both want to go to bed earlier. They both want to get up in general. They're both, this is a whole nother can of worms, but even just with like your sexual appetite, right? Some people want that a lot. I see that a lot with my clients. And of course, it's 99.9% of the time, it's the men who want it and the women who don't. You just see it's very problematic when lifestyle preferences are really, really different, particularly when someone's very spiritually and sattvic, spiritually inclined and really in the mode of goodness, and then the other person isn't. They want to watch TV and they want to not eat nice food offered to Krishna, and the other one just doesn't want any of that. And so there is a lot of conflict and a lot of struggle, and that makes it really hard to focus on your spiritual life. So in that sense, if you're not already married, it is really good to get a sense of like what kind of modes you operate in and what kind of modes, combination of modes your potential partner operates in, and what kind of things you like to do, what kind of things you like to eat, and what kind of things, what time do you want to go to bed, and do you want lots of opulence, or do you want to live simply, and lots of kids or no kids? And I mean, these are really, they're real things that can either help you advance or get in the way of your advancement, depending on, you know, how you make your choices. Now, for a lot of couples, it's too late. You know, they didn't do all that preparation. They didn't do all that research. They didn't do all that inquiry. Or maybe they did, but at the time, the person was sort of operating on this platform. And then later, more different material natures and qualities came out. So it's like, are you the person I married? So even if things are perfect, so to speak, not literally, but you seem like everything's just right and there's such a good combination, there'll still be problems. And even if it isn't a good combination and we don't like to do things in the same way at the same time, you have to sort of deal with the hand that you've been dealt with, right? So the key here is respect. So we have to see not the lower mode activities that they're doing, but you see the spirit soul and you respect that. And then you do things in a way not to criticize them and make them feel bad for what they can't do, but you support them and encourage them and acknowledge them for what they are doing. And then you, without pride, you set your example, because you should never rely or be dependent on somebody else for your own spiritual upliftment. And I think that's a myth too. Ideally, I think in, you know, more traditional cultures, in the Vedic culture, we could say, maybe it was more delineated like that, right? The men were supposed to really set the tone and really carry things. And the women just had to be dutiful and follow their best, and it worked. But we don't live in that culture. We don't live in that society. And Prabhupada said we all have to fly our own plane. So find the commonalities, find the things that you do agree on, the things that do nourish the relationship, and make that your foundation. And then the things that don't work, don't focus on that. Just focus on what does work, and you be a good example for showing how to do things better, but without ego.
A very important point.
Yeah.
Because when you mentioned commonality, I think, sorry, there was a slight delay. Sorry if I interrupted you. So, in terms of, I think there's a bit of a difference between finding commonality and the assumption that you need to find somebody that's your sort of what's a mold like, exactly the same person, isn't it? Because ultimately, it's about finding somebody that complements you. Because, if you take the spirituality aside, you see that two people that are exactly, the male and the female versions of each other, then you could end up in situations, for instance, if both are very strong minded, or if both are very stubborn, spirituality aside, you could clash, right? Because you almost need a very strong willed person with a bit of a demure or a little bit more laid back person, because two things alike sometimes could lead to clashes. I think that is also something important to bear in mind, because it's probably not always a
Yeah,
good
that's
thing.
an excellent point. Excellent. I think that's a great point. It's true. Complementary natures. So I agree. Two strong willed, stubborn people in one household. That's tough. Yeah.
I mean, they
Agreed.
could
That's
both be
really
very
true.
sattvic.
So actually, research shows that sometimes we're often attracted to someone who we're different than. So that can work in your favor in terms of certain situations like the one that you're talking about. Yeah. In terms of the modes, though, that's really key, that you should really try and align with somebody who really is in a similar combination of the modes of nature as you are. That's tough. That's really tough when someone's way up here and someone's way down there, and it's just hard. So as best as you can, try and align that way. But yeah, certain other aspects can be good. Like one person is more demure, one person is a little bit more taking initiative. So yeah, good point.
So, Mata, you were speaking now about the importance of finding compatibility, especially when it's coming, about the modes. That is like a key element where we should align. However, we see often that people assume that they're compatible. So we have a common held notion that if someone is coming from the same community, if they have the same guru, maybe they have the same cultural background, can you assume, based on those commonalities, that you are going to have the same values and you're just automatically going to align?
What do you think? What's your answer to that? I don't think we can assume anything. We cannot, the word assumption is a problem right there. We should never assume. The proof is in the pudding. So you have to observe the person. You have to meet the person's family, and you have to talk to the person's friends and do your research, and observe them. And that's how you know. The externals mean little, very, very little, if anything.
I think that's very, very practical advice. Again, I think that it requires some patience and maturity to take the time to closely observe someone and to try and observe with some objectivity.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a very good point too, because when you get attached to somebody, or even the idea of being with somebody, it's so hard to be objective. You start to get this sort of hormonal thing happening, and then you can't even think clearly anymore when all the chemicals are flowing. And so you might miss red flags, or you might think things are a certain way, but they're not, or that person's acting on their best behavior. But once you get out of this little bubble of temple life and Krishna conscious, they're not really like that anymore. So that's why it's always good to observe people outside of that little Krishna conscious bubble. And like I said, meet the family and see how they lived and where they're from. And it's a big thing. They say when you marry somebody, you don't just marry them, but you marry their family. And that means you marry everything about them. You marry their past, their present, their future. You just marry the nature. Of course, on one side, we say that once a person becomes a Vaishnava, we don't consider, let's say, like the sinful things that they've done in the past. But it's not that we're honing in on those aspects of what they've done. It's just the whole package. What kind of relationships they have with their friends and family, and what kind of upbringing they had. Was it functional? Was it dysfunctional? How do they handle challenges and situations and storms that are certainly going to come? Do they get angry? Are they calm? Can they handle difficulties? Do they just want to run away and hide? Like, these are things that will affect your life. So yeah, I wouldn't rush into it until you're pretty.
I think it's very important to remember you're neither marrying a person in isolation. As you said, you're marrying a person and also his past, his future, his present, and also all his connections, all his other relationships. You are connecting to all of that.
Yep. Yeah, all that conditioning. I mean, it's nice to think it's not there anymore, but honestly, it's with you. Your personality is with you till the end. So in one sense, some cultural conditioning will always be with you, even if you're a very pure elevated soul, you're still going to have cultural conditioning, and that's going to influence the way that you behave and respond and act and take things in and make decisions. And so, does that work with the other person? And if, look, you can make any relationship work, I believe, and based on my studies and research, if there's no abuse, we're not talking about abusive relationships. We're talking about functional, normal, relatively healthy human beings. Even if there's just a lot of differences, there's always ways to come together and find balance and unity and connection. It takes work. Some marriages take more work than other marriages. But if you're not already married, you may as well try and start off on the best foot possible.
I think that was very helpful. Now we've kind of discussed a little bit about certain things people look before getting into a relationship, but there's another thing. So when we get past that point of, making sure, you think this person is compatible, what things would be required to make a relationship successful. And another thing that people that there's a thing or myth, so to speak, out there is that if two people are sincerely practicing bhakti, there's no additional skills required to make a relationship successful. Just because you both happen to be practicing bhakti, the relationship would flourish. What do you think about this?
Well, that would be very nice. But, that's just not the way the world works these days. People come into relationships with a lot of baggage and a lot of expectations and a lot of misunderstandings. And the more you have of those, the more you bring to the relationship, the more difficult it's going to be to have a nice relationship, regardless of the bhakti factor. I mean, the bhakti factor will definitely help, but it's not enough. It's just like Prabhupada, when he had a toothache, he went to the dentist. He didn't just say, no, it'll just go away by itself. You have to go to the dentist. So it's naive to assume that just because you're in a relationship, you may not need any skills and tools and support and education in how to make that relationship work. So it's very naive, just like it's naive to think my toothache will go away. It's naive to think that this is going to be enough. Sometimes it is, but a lot of times it's not. And part of that is the kind of world that we live in. So in previous eras and decades and generations, couples came together as a kind of contract for survival, right? So in an agrarian culture, men and women had to come together and they had to have children so that they could run the land, so they could grow their food, and so they could survive. And so it was less about attraction and love and hormones and more about partnership. And if they were fortunate, then they would be able to grow together and grow to love each other. But these days, it's all about, like I was saying a little earlier, that soulmate. It's all about love and thinking that one person is going to be able to meet all of my needs, my emotional needs, my physical needs, my intellectual needs, my spiritual needs, and the list goes on. And there's just not any one human being who can do that for you. So we've really set ourselves up for failure, if you will, because we've created such high, unrealistic expectations for the other person. And then when they don't do that, we think there's something wrong with them, not us. He didn't do that, or how come she's not like that? Or, so that's part of the problem is that we've really deified, we've turned partnership into like a Disney movie. And if he doesn't meet my standards for prince and she doesn't meet my standards for princess, then they have a problem. So often we're just setting ourselves up for a kind of disaster or failure or very what we call an expectation hangover. I forgot what the question was, but
But then, the point you made was very important because it's something that we need to look at because relationships in an agrarian society, like you'd rightly pointed out, was based on almost a contractual need. A woman would be the sole caretaker, the husband would be the breadwinner, and you needed 10 children because, God forbid, there was a farm that needed looking
yeah,
after. But given that the society has evolved, I think how important or how much of an importance should we place on things like that intellectual compatibility, that because if you're looking at
yeah,
particularly ladies, I know quite a few ladies that are in this position whereby say if you're economically sort of self-sustainable, you've got an income, you don't need that economic sustainability from a partner. So if a woman is in that situation whereby they've got that stability, is it wrong to actually look for other things beyond somebody's, job and that paycheck, so to speak, the emotional aspects
yeah.
that
So that comes
your partner
back
would
to
bring?
that compatibility of natures. So yeah, there should be some intellectual compatibility because you want to be able to talk to your partner about more deep, meaningful things and have meaningful, spiritually enlivening conversations based on whatever your level is at. And yeah, you want to agree that how you're going to live your lives financially. And yeah, so it's true that some of that has to be there. And that's based on this kind of compatibility of natures. Um, but the point is, when you set such high expectations that every single emotional, physical, mental, intellectual need is going to be met, then that's just not possible. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I think there's just got to be, give and take. You need to be able to kind of ascertain which, in your sort of not a to-do list, your requirements list, which, prioritize them. I'm a project manager, so
Yeah,
it's like what are the must-have requirements, what are the
yeah,
should-have,
right,
what are the could-have requirements, So I think
right.
it's just that having that maturity to kind of look at. For me, it's the intellectual compatibility. For another person, it could be this. It's just there's no one size fits
Good
all, I
point.
suppose.
Yeah, because you can't have everything.
No.
You can't have everything. You may have a very reliable, dependent, dharmic husband who's maybe just kind of boring. He's just not that much fun and he doesn't talk a lot and, you know, but then you may get this handsome, exciting, charming guy who plays mridanga and leads kirtans, but he can't hold down a job. But he's exciting. He's got a great personality. What would you rather have? So agreed. Agreed. You're not going to get it all. So you have to decide what are your negotiables, what are your non-negotiables, and it should really be in relationship to your peace of mind, because without peace, there's no question of even executing spiritual life. If you're not peaceful in the home, then you're not going to be peaceful anywhere.
Sure, dear. Did you want to make a comment?
I don't think
Or
she's
have we got?
here
Okay, I
anything.
can see her. Okay. That's fine. So we spoke a little bit about, what bits we need to take into consideration when, looking at compatibility and, being also proportionate. Life is not a Disney movie, it's a real world. So people have to have realistic expectations. So if somebody was to get into a marriage or relationship, there's also this kind of idea that counseling, I know you touched upon counseling earlier, but there's also this idea that, or conception that counseling is only required for people that are, or couples that are having issues. So is this a real thing? Can people, even before you perhaps start a relationship, think about, oh, can we actually have some counseling, or is it just for people that are having issues?
Yeah. So I guess it depends how you define counseling. And there's lots of definitions, right? We can look at it in a very broad spectrum way. So for some couples, just having older couple mentors is going to be that enough for them, right? They're just going to have some couple in their community or on their Zoom community who they relate to and they respect and they aspire to be like, and that couple is going to be there for them when they need help and support. But then there are going to be some couples who are really in need of professional help. And I don't see why they wouldn't go to get it. Because if you need, again, if you're sick, you go to the doctor. If your car's broken, you take it to the mechanic. If your roof is leaking, you have the roof repaired. If your child needs education, you take your child to school. So it's the same. Relationships need tending to, right? I mean, I think that's one thing that maybe ISKCON is learning now, is that marriages need as much energy and focus as other important parts of their life, like their relationship with their spiritual master or their relationship with their children or their job or whatever it is. I think in previous generations, they sort of just thought, like we were saying earlier, you just get married and everything's going to be fine. But it didn't really work out that way, especially because a lot of those marriages were not done the way we do them now, right? You do your research, you do your inquiry, you check out the family. I was just listening to Kamalini and Apoorva Prabhu talk on Namras Prabhu's podcast. They met each other the day they got married. And they just walked down the street on separate sides of the street to the register office to get their marriage license. And they're one amazing, extraordinary couple that's still together. But you know how many couples had similar scenarios and are not together anymore? And then there are couples that just see, the longer you're in a relationship that you neglect, where you sense that something is going wrong and you don't do anything about it, the bigger the problem becomes and the longer it takes to resolve it. So intelligent couples, when they sense that there's some kind of conflict or issue that they're not able to resolve, they go to get professional help so that they can resolve it, because it's a drain of time and energy to be in a problematic relationship. And what it does is it just takes away from what you could be doing, what you could be accomplishing and achieving, from all the service you could be doing, and from the harmony in the home. And when there's no harmony in the home, then the children, they just pick up on all of that negativity and then they repeat it. So here's the thing. When we go to school, we go to primary school and then secondary school and then university and then PhD. But what school, what class is there to learn about marriage and relationships? None, pretty much. So when you enter a relationship, what do you really know? All you know is what you saw, the modeling of your parents. And most people didn't have great modeling. Or maybe there was good modeling, but maybe you just that's just not one of your strong suits. One of your strengths is relationships. Maybe you're very shy and introverted. You don't know how to open up. You're afraid to be vulnerable, or maybe you have an anger management issue, or a myriad of things that you bring to the relationship that can affect it in such a negative way, and you can't figure out what's wrong. But if you go to a professional and you figure out what the problem is, 9 times out of 10, you can solve it. So it's smart people that get professional help, and ignorant people, lazy people, people that just don't think it's worth it, don't get the help.
No, thank you, Mother, for that wonderful response. One thing I wanted to pick up, the example you gave, two people just met and, met on the day of the marriage, so to speak. But then we also touched upon the importance of, doing some research before you get into relationships to find out about their family, the community, and what have you. But there's also another sort of idea or perception that's lurking around. I've seen this particularly, certain preachers, devotees flagging this round, saying that, two people before getting married shouldn't be associating for that long. For instance, the less contact, the less sort of relationship or dating time, or as Vaishnavas, are we even allowed to date? So, what do you have? Because where do you draw that fine line? So should Vaishnavas date or not?
Yeah. So there's going to be more than one opinion. And, like I said earlier, I don't have a monopoly on the right way. There's going to be varying opinions. And I think that in traditional cultures, that really works, where you have the parents and the grandparents, and you have this big community of support, and the astrology's been done, and it seems like it's good, and there's a whole team of people, loving people, seniors and well-wishers, who are working towards making this union happen. And yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Even in the Hasidic Jewish tradition, couples meet, individuals meet. They only meet a few times in one of the homes of one of the families. And, they just sort of make a decision. But there's so much energy that went into it before that, the research and the inquiry. And maybe they don't do astrology exactly, but they do other things. And they have multi-generations of people there to support them. So, I'm not opposed 100% to that idea, but based on, I think, what we're dealing with today with the devotees, younger devotees who are getting married, and their backgrounds and the kind of support or lack thereof that they get, I've seen in my observation that those who rush into it usually regret it. Not always, but usually they don't really know who they're marrying. And then those who take a little bit more time, they know what they're getting into. And so when they make the choice, it's much more conscious, and therefore they take much more responsibility for that choice. So even if it turns out it wasn't so great, they're responsible, they're accountable. And so they're going to be much more committed to sticking with it and working out the kinks. Whereas if you get into it just out of passion or off the fly or just whatever, they thought we'd make a good couple, or I don't know, I really like him, or yeah, we do Sankirtan, we blah, 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 lots of reasons. Then after, first of all, sometimes there's emotional trauma because they didn't know the person. In fact, I just was working with a client earlier today who had a situation like that. She's a new devotee, and she met this devotee, and he seemed like he was just the perfect guy. And then they got together, and then he had some crisis. So he asked if he could stay with her for a little while. And I mean, it just turned into a nightmare where she had to literally lock the bedroom door at night because she was fearful of her life. So she had a really big lesson. And I'm not saying this happens all the time. So like I said, I'm not a black and white person, and I just don't think that black and white works in this world anyway. But in general, from my observation and experience in my profession, taking more time is better. And maybe dating is a scary word for some people, like for more traditional conservative people, because it makes it seem like you can just go out and do whatever you want. And I'm not promoting that at all. I'm promoting following the principles and being very chaste and cultured and responsible in your getting to know that person. However, you should know what you're getting into, because the idea is one marriage, right? Nobody wants to get divorced. And especially in our more traditional viewpoints of Hare Krishna and Krishna consciousness, divorce is frowned upon. But if you're marrying someone and you really don't know, and it turns out to be a terrible marriage, then what's your option? So to avoid that kind of much bigger mistake, take your time, but do it responsibly.
No, thank you. As always, very sensible. And I think it's just drawing that line, like you said, isn't it? Doing it in a responsible but, chaste way. Because, we all say, for instance, go meet people. If somebody went out for dinner, for instance, you're always going to put up not a front, but, the way that you present yourself is always going to be a little bit different to, the way you are. So, like you said, if you don't actually spend some quality time doing whatever it is,
Yeah.
getting to know somebody, you might never know the person who's underneath all that facade until you've married. And god forbid if it turns out to be something different to what your clients discovered. I think people have to be very careful. And
Yeah.
like you say, one size doesn't fit all. It's be making sure you realize what works for you and what you're comfortable with. I
Yeah.
suppose is
Yeah.
the
It's
moral of
always
the story.
available. There's never any guarantee, but it's kind of like if it's going to rain. If there's rain in the forecast, then bring your umbrella. So it's kind of like that, do your due diligence, prepare, and then let go and let God.
Hmm. Shode, can you hear us? No? Okay, I think Shode is having a few technical difficulties. But another question we've just thought would be interesting to explore is that we spoke about where we having compatibilities where people get into various uncomfortable situations, but there's also this idea that people that have or couples that have healthy relationships very seldomly have disagreements or arguments. What's your experience on
Yeah,
this?
that's such a good question. So, even happy couples and all the research done over decades of time with hundreds and hundreds of couples, um, even happy couples argue. It's not that you argue, but it's how you argue and what is the outcome of the argument. So if couples argue and that things get very volatile and they run away from each other and slam doors and then, they don't talk for a couple of days, that's not good. But if a couple argues and they can both be calm and respectful and rational and be willing to hear the other person's point of view and be influenced by it and validate it, be a good listener, then that's an opportunity for deeper connection and closeness. So arguing isn't bad. It's just how you argue and what's the outcome of the argument. And that's a long topic, but hopefully that answer is good enough for now.
Thank you. Sharadi, are you there?
Hare Krishna, yes, I'm back. Sorry, we're having load shedding in South Africa, so the internet's not that stable or reliable. Hope you can hear me. So, I wanted to touch upon another topic, which I think, if one is not so versed in psychology, one of the belief that one often has is that if your partner loves you, they will know what your needs are without you needing to express yourself. So, is this true? If someone dearly loves you,
Yeah.
they'll just know
Yeah.
what you
So if
need and what you want.
what you're talking about is a very emotionally intelligent couple. Very emotionally intelligent couples actually have that kind of simpatico. They have that kind of ability to almost read the other person's mind and expressions, almost predict, what they need and what they're going to say. But that's very rare, and that takes a lot of time and work. So in general, the answer is no. But the way that you can get your needs met is by telling your partner what you do need in a very respectful, non-demanding, non-critical way. So I think women tend to really want men to read their minds. It's sort of the female nature just really wants the guy to like just do that and be there and have everything ahead of what she really wants. But we have to know that men are not mind readers. And so I remember in the beginning of my marriage, I would get upset with my husband for not knowing or doing. He said, well, I can't read minds. You have to tell me. And then I thought, I don't want to tell you. There's no fun. There's no magic, right? There's no rasa in that. But then I started telling him, and then he did what I needed. And it was just made me really grateful and happy. And I had to just accept that, again, we're not in the Disney Leelas here. There's no Disney magic. So you have to be willing to sort of let go of that unrealistic idea of romance and just say what you need. Just ask for what you want. Because men, they really want to make their women happy. But a lot of times they don't know how. And that's because the women won't tell them. The women just get mad at them for not doing it. But the men never knew they wanted them to do it because the women don't want to tell them because they don't think they should have to tell them that there's something wrong with the men if they don't know. So that is a really key point and there's something the women have to just accept because it's a disappointment. It's like, oh, really? I have to tell him? I don't want to. He should just know. But, we're talking needle in a haystack here. There's a few men out there that are on that frequency, but so few. So few. So really, you just have to be willing. And then, so here's what happens. You decide, okay, let me tell him, let me explain to him, and then he does it. And then you get in this rhythm. And the rhythm's really nice because basically the man feels valued and useful and like he's doing a good job because he's making her happy. That's all men want to do is make women happy. But women make it really hard sometimes for the men to be able to make them happy. So if a woman is willing to put in the effort to help the man know how to make her happy, then they establish a kind of rhythm and a kind of arrangement so that eventually he will know because she's told her enough times. I mean, she's told him enough times. So he's on it. He's on it now. He's figured her out. But you can't expect that in the beginning. You can only expect that when there's a lot of goodwill a lot of respect and love and just positivity and appreciation in the relationship. And that's really a culture that couples build, right? So couples who spend time building a culture of appreciation, that's when you can sort of get to that magic, those magic moments. But the magic moments, you have to work to get there. They're not generally there in the beginning, especially if it's a young man. You know, young men, what do they know? They don't have much experience, and you know, it's just expecting too much from them. So you have to help them. I think somebody can we hear you now, Sardia? Or both of you are, oh yeah, I hear you now. I think we lost Dee. We lost someone.
Oh, sorry, my microphone was muted. I'm so sorry.
Oh no, that's okay. I've just been sitting here.
No. Another point that people think, particularly when once you've got married, that your partner thinks that you think that you will always be your partner's priority. Is this a right thing to think or expect, that you will always be their priority?
It would be nice. And I think in really good relationships where you've been building a culture of appreciation, where you've been spending months or years really acknowledging the wonderful things that your partner has done for you, and has done just in general as a person, then you will be each other's priority. And so Dr. John Gottman, who's one of my teachers, he says for him, when his wife, this is his aspiration. When my wife is in pain, the world stops. So like that's what he wants to be cued in, so that when he sees that she's in distress or anything, she needs him, big, medium, or small, he knows that his job, his God-given sort of job as a attentive husband, is to just put aside everything else that seems so pressing and so important and to be there for her, and vice versa. And this is sort of the ultimate need and hope of every human being who gets in a relationship, to believe that my spouse is there for me when I'm in pain. I can count on them. They've got my back. And when they're not there, the pain is so great, it's compared to like stepping on a nail. So actually, they did this research. They did these studies. They put people through sort of like MRI machines, but these machines tested all these different spots in their brains that showed calm and angst and all the different levels of what the brain goes through. And it was all in relationship to what they were being fed information-wise about how much their partner loves them, or standing next to their partner and their partner either squeezing their hand or not really holding it very tightly. And all of the good signs in the brain were illuminated when there was positivity and connection between the people, the one in the machine and the one next to them. And when the person in the machine had fear or belief that that person wasn't going to be there for them, then all these very alarming, bright red signals went off that there was danger. And you feel it in your body, just as if you're stepping on a nail. So, that is really, I think, what every spouse really deeply down desires, that they know that when I need you, you're there, you're here for me. I don't know if that answered the question, but I don't even know what the question was anymore.
Thank you so much, Mata. The question was, can you believe that you'll always be your
yeah.
spouse's top
Yeah.
priority?
Right.
And
Right. Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think you gave us.
Oh, but there's another flip side to that. So that's like the goal. That's like we want pure devotional service. That's like we want Shudanam. But that takes effort and work, not on his part or her part, but on your part. That's where the dividing line usually is. What's wrong with him? What's wrong with her? Why won't she do this? Why won't he be there? So we tend to look at the faults in the other person, what they're not doing. And then because we don't think that they're treating us well, we start to treat them badly too. That's where it all sort of, goes downhill. But the idea here is it starts from you. You take accountability. You take responsibility for your part plus. However, so it takes a lot to build up that kind of, when my partner's in pain, I'm there for her or him. But in general, to expect that is, again, you're going to have another expectation hangover. You're not going to get that. I mean, rarely do we get that. When you think about all the things that somebody's juggling in their life, their career, their devotional service, their children, and then whatever else, and then the spouse too. That's one of many things that you have to give priority to. So couples who are able to have that, I've got your back kind of mood, they put effort and time into the relationship in a conscious way, month after month, year after year. It's consciously cultivated.
Thank you so much, Matt. I think that was, again, very practical response. And I think you're right. It's one thing to have that expectation that you're always going to be your partner's top priority. And it's another thing to cultivate that commitment to make your partner a priority, especially when they need you. And I think if you in that consciousness and you have selected a partner wisely, then it's more realistic to know that they will reciprocate, at some point in time, according to their capacity. So thank you very much. No,
well, it just takes work. Good marriages take work, no matter what. Even if it's your perfect partner, it's still going to take work. It's like,
yes,
yeah, you just can't think it's going to work out just because you like each other, you love each other, or you have a lot in common. It just, relationships in Kali Yuga are really difficult because we are acting out of ego. We all have egos the size of a universe, and we want to be right, and we don't like it when we're wrong, and it's just really symptomatic of Kali Yuga. So if you look at all of the things we're fighting against because of Kali Yuga, then we have to be willing to put that much more effort and energy into making the relationship work because of the age that we find ourselves in, and this modern age of technology and whatever, the list just goes on, how many distractions and things there are to take us away from just having a good, healthy, meaningful relationship.
Yeah, I think that is a very, very important and powerful point, that if you want a good relationship, it's going to take time, it's going to take commitment, it's going to take effort, and it's something that you build gradually. It's not something that just happens, spontaneously, even if you have that good compatibility, even if you have, similar natures, etc. Now, almost related to that point is this idea that we sometimes have, especially before marriage. You meet someone and you might be conscious that they have certain characteristics or certain habits which you don't like and which you actually think won't work for you. But you have this belief that if they love you enough, or if you love them enough, that they will change drastically one day. Is that a
Mm.
realistic expectation? Someone's going to change, especially because they love me or I love them.
Yeah, right. Well, love is a very lofty word. So, there's a lot of different ways to interpret that word and a lot of ways to manifest it. So I'm a little wary when, people just say, I love him and he loves me and we're going to make this work. So, okay, wait, just sorry. What was the question again? Oh, yeah, no, go ahead. Yeah. What is it? Sorry.
Can we expect someone to change
Yeah.
substantially?
Oh, yeah.
Because
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. The love is one part, but really the main issue here is that whatever you get, that's who you get. People don't change. They only change if they want to. And then even if they want to change and they try, it's generally a slow process. So you should really know what you see is what you get. And to think, like, I had another client this morning and her big mistake, she said, she's trying to invite in a nice Krishna conscious partner. And she said she had this habit of getting in relationships with projects, men who were projects, who were works in progress. And she thought, I can fix this. She thought, I'm just going to make him a better man. And she never once was able to do that. So it doesn't mean he won't become a better man, but you can't count on it. You can't get into a relationship thinking it's going to be better than it is now, or he's going to upgrade, or he's going to get this, or no, that's really foolish. And again, setting yourself up for probably a failure. Again, it may happen. Miracles happen and people want to do self-improvement, but don't count on that. Because really, just if you're going to marry someone and they have a great sense of humor and you love it, but they're really sloppy and you don't like it, just know I'm marrying a guy with a great sense of humor and he's really sloppy. And I'm just going to have to learn to live with his sloppiness. And I'm not going to later resent that he's sloppy and I'm not. You may be able to reform him, or he may be able to reform himself if you're able to have that. If you've spent time building that culture of appreciation, he really understands why neatness and cleanliness are so valuable to you, why it's such a deeply inherent principle to you. He might, because he cares about you, because he knows how much you care about him, he might step up to the plate and do more. But you can't count on that because it's just his nature is messy. So to think that you're just going to turn this guy around is very, very foolish.
Thank you, Mata. We can hear you speak from a lot of experience, and I think especially from counseling, so many couples. I think you get, you see a lot of examples, and I think a couple of things that stood out to me. The one was that I think often with women, there can be this mentality of I'm going to fix someone, I'm going to improve them. And I think we should be wary of going into a romantic relationship, with that idea. You can use that in another cause, but it's not a good motivation to come into a relationship. And I also think it's sometimes some therapists call it the one-day wager, that one day this person will change. And I think, what you made very clear is when you marry someone, you should accept them as they are. And really ask yourself, am I comfortable, with this person exactly as they are? If they don't change in any way, am I going to be happy and content and not resentful?
Yeah, exactly.
Not resentful. Like you gave a good example. Someone may be really sloppy. You have to ask yourself, will I live with that? Without criticizing them as well. So I think that is definitely powerful because, as you said, people can change, but then we should see that as a bonus. We can't, expect they're going to change. they're going to change radically. Now, it's been wonderful hearing so much from you, and we're going to move on to a couple of questions that we have from our audience. So one question which I found particular interesting is Sydney was saying, how do you keep from losing yourself, or depending, I think she means, from your partner, when your partner has a very unhealthy Superman complex? And then she adds that she does appreciate that he wants to take care of her, and he wants to take care of the son, but at the same time she feel that it's a bit excessive, and she also needs a level of independence. So how would you respond to this
Yeah, I mean,
question?
really, you just have to tell him, but you have to tell him really, really nicely with full vulnerability and not expecting anything in return. So when you talk to him, you don't say, this would be the wrong way to do it. You have a Superman complex, and I feel that I appreciate what you do, how you want to take care of us, but you're too controlling. And I just find that you have a Superman complex, and I don't like it, and it makes me really uncomfortable. And I need my independence. I mean, that sounds straightforward, but the problem is you've just made critical remarks about him. And whenever somebody says something to us that's not nice, we get defensive. We cut ourselves off from being able to be empathic and responsive. And you talked as much about him as you did about yourself, but the real issue here is you, not him. So a better way to say it would just be like, I'm so grateful that you are so keen on taking care of me and our son, and I love you for that. I'm grateful for that. Sometimes I feel like I could just really use some alone time. Somehow I just feel like I've lost myself a little bit, or I've lost myself a lot, and I'm not feeling good. I'm feeling unhealthy, and I'm feeling like I need some independence. So would you be willing to talk about how we can make that happen for me? So I didn't say anything about him doing anything wrong. I just was willing to be vulnerable and tell him about my own difficulties. And then I asked him for his help. Now, if he's not willing to help after that, then he has a problem. Then you could just leave it at that, and then maybe just try again. He'll think about it. I mean, he's not going to get angry. The worst case scenario is he'll just say, well, I don't really know if I can do anything for you right now. I don't know. And so if he says that, then he has his own issues. So then you have to just give it some time and then try it again. And then if it's still bad, then you could get some counseling, whether it's just you or the two of you. But generally, reasonable people will respond favorably when they hear someone calling out for help, as long as you're not blaming them for your problem.
Thank you so much, Matt. I think, again, very practical advice. I think to summarize, you were saying that first give appreciation, and then express or share your experience and express your feelings, and then make a request, so that there wasn't a criticism, there wasn't an attack, and there was also a solution offered. Like, you're asking for help, you're asking the partner to help you move towards a solution. So I think that we definitely need you to teach many of us how to communicate in our relationships, and especially solve these difficulties we have, because I do hear there's a very specific way that will help you to a favorable result, and you could very easily address this issue in the wrong way. The lady who asked the question, Sydney, she was expressing that it's very helpful. So she says, thank you very much. She really found your response valuable. Now we're going to have some more questions from our audience. Do you want to share this question? I think it's a very good one from Krishna Premi Dasi. There it is.
Thank you. If you flag it, yeah, thank you, Martha. So, I know we touched upon, the importance of having mentors and having that circle of support almost around you to get that support and advice and guidance you need. So, something related to that, Krishna Premi Devidasi asks, how about senior couples in the community who offer advice, however, do not have proper qualifications and just base their opinion of their own life experience, which is not exemplary? How should devotees respectfully go around it? As I often notice, these advice are the opposite of helpful, and devotees tend to have difficulty to differentiate helpful from toxic in those cases.
Well, you could just make sure that you're setting a good example yourself. And if you think you have better advice, then you can approach those couples and say, would you, I can offer you some support if you'd like it. Or if you know those people who gave the advice that you don't think was good, then you can just ask them, can I, with all humility, tell you what I'm thinking? Just tell them what you think. So you have options. You can speak with those senior people with humility, but honesty. You can set your own good example, and then you can approach the younger couples who got what you call the bad advice and give them yours.
No, thank you. And I think one other thing that's related to it that we need to bear in mind is who we go to for advice, isn't it? So we need to often, as individuals seeking advice, also have that intelligence and maturity to, for instance, you can't ask a sannyasi guru about how to resolve your marriage problem, because they might be able to help you with the shastras, but they're not an expert in the grihastha ashram. So I think
Yeah,
that's also something we need to bear in mind. It's always good to ask for advice, but we need to make sure we go to the right people to ask
great
that
point.
question.
Yeah, everybody should find a couple that they respect and admire, and make that couple your mentors and the people that you take guidance and suggestion and advice from. So if other well-meaning people come along to give you advice, but you don't really connect with them, or you don't even necessarily think they have such a good marriage, then just take it, and okay, thank you, and move on. It's just to be polite, but you don't have to take it in and follow it.
Thank you, Martha. Sharadia, you had another question you wanted to pick up from the audience?
Yes, yeah, I just wanted to reflect one point and say I think it's key to discriminate against who you ask for what advice. And as you say, choose the couples which you actually, when you see their marriage, their relationship, their interactions with each other, you find that inspiring. Yeah, we have another question. I hope I'm going to understand this question properly. So the lady is asking, what to do if a husband and wife has the same problem? For example, they can't get up early and they drag one another back down. Sometimes the wife, sometimes the husband. So how can we solve such a problem?
I mean, that you need spiritual support. You need to go to the spiritual master or to somebody else who gives you inspiration, and just reveal your heart and get some guidance. And one thing I think to keep in mind is that we don't have to fix everything about every problem all at once. So sometimes what happens is you get overwhelmed. So let's say you're in a really bad space in your consciousness, right? In your spiritual sadhana. And so, like here, this is a good example. You can't get up, and then da 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 da. And it's just like, it's just like the domino effect. But then when you do think about doing it, you get overwhelmed. Like, oh my God, I have to get up every day at 4 and chant all my rounds and read from the Bhagavatam for an hour. And from where you are to where you want to be, that's like jumping up a huge staircase and risk falling, breaking your neck, spraining your ankle. It's not safe. So maybe think of just walking up one step. Because if you can get up one step and stay there, then you can get up the next step and stay there. So don't make it like this big all or nothing thing. Think, okay, tonight I'm going to go to bed early, and tomorrow I'm going to get up early, and I'm going to chant so many rounds. And I'm going to do that. Like, you've really made an achievable goal. Because if you achieve it, then you've just proven to yourself with evidence that I can do this. And then you can do it again. And then you just repeat your accomplishments. But if you make them too far, then it's a self-defeating thing. So that would be my advice. Just slow down and lower, make more realistic what your little baby steps are towards getting to a better place than you're at. And whether your husband does it or not, that's his problem, not yours. Don't use him as an excuse. You be the one to just start doing the right thing, and just don't think, oh, well, he's not doing it, I'm not doing it. You got to fly your own plane. We already talked about that earlier. Can't blame your partner for you not being more Krishna conscious than you want to be. That's not being responsible for your own life.
I think it's a very valuable point that you made, and I think you've made it a couple of times, is that we've got to take full accountability for ourselves and also our spiritual life. And then I think it was very practical that you said is that even if you have a high goal, think about a small step you can take and then work towards that. And then gradually you can make progress. Now, one last question that we discussed this a bit earlier before we went live, and this was, is a Vedic marriage always the ideal marriage? Because sometimes we get very excited in ISKCON about everything needing to be Vedic, and people often say they want the Vedic husband, they want a Vedic wife. So is Vedic always the best?
Yeah, so what we were talking about is how Vedic has to be applied intelligently, appropriately, realistically to the world that we live in today. And having a Vaishnav marriage is the best thing that you can do, and really the only thing that you can do. And some Vedic principles are going to fit into that and some won't. So we don't want to be foolish and try and replicate something that happened thousands of years ago in a completely different time, place, and part of the world, and the whole thing. We'll never be able to recreate Vedic culture exactly as it was. But there are principles about it that are very helpful. But even higher than that is Vaishnav culture. So if you can have a Vaishnav marriage, then you've automatically achieved a Vedic marriage.
Thank you so much, Mata. Beautiful answer. One thought I had upon Vedic culture is that, Vedic often obviously comes from the word Veda, which is knowledge. So it seems that Vedic culture is a culture based on knowledge. And then I think about, the work that you've done, the training that you've done about really understanding how relationships work, but that's also knowledge. So for me, it's like, if you want to have a Vedic marriage in the current time, you should also base your marriage upon knowledge of relationships, knowledge of understanding of yourself, etc. So I think that would be another way.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really good point. Thank you.
Well, we just see that. Do we have time for one more question? I just saw one more question popping up. Do we have time for one more question?
I think
Start.
we could go for it.
Okay, I'm going to show it. Dee, welcome to share it.
Yes, so Martha, we've got a question from Gora Shupleg. I do apologize if I pronounce the name wrong. But his question is, why is for so many people who practice Krishna consciousness hard to find their healthy, holistic place, fulfill their needs, have a supportive environment in ISKCON?
Oh, that's a really big question. I don't know why it's so hard. I mean, there could be a lot of reasons. You know, it could be the person. They came to Krishna consciousness with a lot of unhealthy thoughts and beliefs and conditioning, and so they're not healthy and whole, and they're just bringing that with them. You know, like we're on the shower, but it doesn't mean we're not dirty. So we're engaged in this really amazing process, but it doesn't mean that we're clean and pure. Another reason could be the institution is failing them. You know, there are needs that just aren't being met, and whether that's the individuals that are in their community or the institution as a whole isn't just giving them the support and help that they need. Yeah, it's complicated, and I don't think there's one little answer. I think that every person should be doing their part to make that question, you know, to answer that so that that question doesn't even exist anymore. Like, and however you need to do that is okay with me. If you however you need to make yourself whole and holistic and fulfilled within ISKCON is good. Whatever goodness and positivity, whatever good contribution you can make, even if it seems really small, is going to make it better, as opposed to this idea, which really has been sort of thematic, is that we're relying on ISKCON to fix us. We're relying on other people and institutions and organizations and groups to make our life better, as opposed to initiating and doing the needful to make our lives better in any way that we can, by reaching out to the right people, getting the right kind of support. And if you haven't gotten that, keep looking for it. Don't give up. But it's too easy to make excuses. So just take it upon yourself. Like, I can do this. I'm going to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem.
Thank you. It was a great answer. And I think, as the saying goes, you need to sometimes be the change you want to see. If there's something that you see is lacking, there's nothing stopping you from actually making that change. And also, I think I've
and
personally
Sydney
found,
Rader,
yeah.
Sorry, I love this comment that Sydney made. Sorry.
No worries, Mata.
Okay. You have to be brave and willing to reach out for help when needed. Not always easy, but necessary. So I think that's a really good point, that we have to be willing to go get help. That we have to submit ourselves or be vulnerable or reach out for help when we need it, even though it's not easy at all. So thank you for that amazing contribution, Sydney. Thank you. Such an enriching podcast. Always amazed by blah, blah, blah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So can anyone hear me over there? I think we lost you both
I can
again. So,
hear you.
okay,
I
okay.
think we've probably lost Sharadia, but no. Thank you everybody for all your lovely comments and questions.
I think I'm the only one now that you can hear. So I might just have to end this. Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, Chaitanya Dasi. I guess I'll close it out because I think I'm the only person you all can hear. So thank you all. Thank you so much. Please forgive any offenses or mistakes I may have made, or my humanness full of errors. But thank you for tolerating me. And I guess we're just going to end it now. So I'm going to say goodbye. Okay. Hare Krishna.